All right, this is the day 2 video for our week 7, our final week of notes. So let's look at this section. Now, I did not choose to do 7B1 and the pre-video at all, this section, mainly because we kind of need a lot more of the information in the 7A material to be really good at that and understand what we're doing. So we're just going to jump to the one that's kind of its own topic, and we're going to do this one completely on the pre-video, and we'll not talk about it in class unless someone brings up a question. Also to note on this one, this is the only homework assignment for the whole semester that is not in Newton. It is in Ivy Learn. You still click on it through your calendar or modules. It just opens an Ivy Learn kind of quiz instead of a homework assignment. It's not actually a quiz. That's just how we have to write it in Ivy Learn. It'll still count in your homework grade. Okay. So on 7B2, polling and margins of error summary, let's look at the following things. So a survey is kind of like when we send out a questionnaire or something and we ask people questions, or we go somewhere and we poll people and ask them questions. And sometimes there's human error or just error in general within a survey. So with these problems, we will read the results that were provided from the survey. So they did their study, they got the data. Then they'll also usually publish alongside of that their margin of error. So we will then talk about what that actually means. So we'll apply that margin of error to the reported percentage. The way that is done is we add and subtract the margin of error from the reported percentage, and then we will write a sentence about that result. So that actual range of low to high or lower to upper bound, when we talk about that, we are actually going to be calling that, for our class, a 95% confidence interval. So the 95% has nothing to do with the reported percentage. That is just the name of the specific confidence interval that most surveys report. It means their margin of error calculations that came up with their margin of error are done with a 5% kind of margin of error itself. So it's just what they call it. But we'll have a reported percentage about our data. We'll have a reported margin of error percentage. Those two things are what we add and subtract to get our confidence interval. And then we will write a very specific kind of fill in the blank sentence about that. So also to note, they sometimes ask you in the homework about the sample size. That's just the number of people in the survey that we studied. So let's look at this. So it says a survey of 1,248 Ivy Tech students showed that 78% of people, so that's a reported percentage from the survey, will use their quantitative reasoning after the class finishes. And I know that's true at least for the mortgage stuff that we covered. Everybody should be able to use that. If the margin of error is plus or minus 3.2%, find that confidence interval. So remember, like I said, this is not the reported percentage. It's just the type of confidence interval we are finding. And then we'll write a sentence about it. So something to note is sometimes they will actually ask you what was the sample size as part of the questions. That's just how many people we surveyed. We surveyed 1,248 Ivy Tech students. The confidence interval is reported as a percentage, the reported percentage, which was 78%. So we don't know if that's accurate. It might be a little lower, it might be a little higher, okay? So we take that reported percentage of what we were studying, which was using this class after you finish the class. We'll add and subtract that margin of error. So we subtract the 3.2% to get the lower bound, and we add the 3.2% to get the upper bound. So notice I got from 74.8 to 81.2. So the 95% confidence interval is, and this is what we would say, even though they reported 78% of people use quantitative reasoning after this class finishes, we're only 95% confident about that actually it might be between 74.8 and 81.2%. So there's a little give and take. We could have had some error in our data, okay? So the sentence that we're going to be doing is pretty much the same format for the whole thing. It's, I'm 95% confident that we would have had our lower bound to our upper bound, percent of people will, and then we talk about what we were studying. Use quantitative reasoning after this class. Okay, so that's it. It's pretty simple. I just can't write and talk after this class, not this school. And a lot of these sometimes are drop-down menus on some of the Newton stuff, or not Newton, but the Ivy Learn. Some of them are drop-down menus. Some of them only have you fill in specific parts. So just, make sure your sentence makes sense when you read it. So what we're saying is, even though they said 78% of people will use it after this class, that's not an exact science. it's more likely that it's somewhere between 74.8 and 81.2%. Okay, using the margin of error at this 95% confidence. All right, so that's it. Day 2 video in the books.